We have three remarkable and very different women with very different leadership journeys and very diverse messages on how to be a leader, the challenges they've faced on the way and how they've overcome those hurdles. Would you please put your hands together for our first panellist, the CEO of Arts Access Australia, Emma Bennison. And isn't that a beautiful dog? I have to tell you, I had the great privilege of having a drink with Emma last night, and she has a wicked sense of humour. So I look forward to hearing some of these messages, Emma. Our second panellist is the 2014 ACT Young Citizen of the Year. Would you please welcome Nipuni Wijewickrema. I don't know whether you know of Nipuni, but she set up Gigi's Flowers, which has provided us with these wonderful bouquets today. They're absolutely magnificent and free of charge, so thank you, Nipuni, they're gorgeous. Our third speaker, you would all know her, the wonderful CEO of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kate Carnell. Amongst many other things. You're a woman of many talents.
No, I'm just old.
Kate and I were on a board together about 20 years ago, and that made us feel very old indeed, didn't it?
It did. We did the NRMA board together during the bad times, so we have lots of stories.
Absolutely. We'll tell you over a drink one night.
It would be a very long drink, I'd have to say.
In the cone of silence. I've just finished reading Anna Bligh's book, and one of the things she says is the childhood that she had really did create the fire in her belly for leadership. There were problems with her father. As the eldest child, she had to effectively take on a lot of the parenting in the household. And that's one of the reasons why she felt very comfortable with leadership. I'm wondering, and I'd like to throw this open to the three of you, was there something in your childhood that made you realise, I'm cut out for this, I can be a leader?
Well, yes, I would have to say. So I have been blind since birth, and I started off going to a special school. I'm not going to go through my whole history, don't panic. But when I was in year 3, my parents decided that I should have the opportunity to attend a Catholic school. I think that's where things started to go wrong, but we won't talk about that. But so I went to this quote unquote normal mainstream Catholic primary school, and often found that books weren't brailled on time. The resources that I needed in class simply didn't exist. I got a lot of teasing, I got a lot of bullying. People used to steal things from me. This is not a poor me story, but it's just a fact. And so I had to advocate from a very young age. And so I think I realised in about year 12 when I realised that I couldn't sit the Queensland Core Skills Test, which in the booklet about the state test, it said everyone can sit this test, and yet I couldn't. I think that was when I kind of went, hang on, I think this might be my purpose. I think I might have found my purpose in life. So I think it was always going to happen. I've fought against it at times, to be honest, because sometimes I'd just like to go and do something else and not be defined by this one, very small facet of my identity. But I think the fact of the matter is it was always going to happen. Yeah.
Well put. Nipuni?
I think for me, I went to an all-girls school from prep, and sometimes girls, they can't be very nice. They can be gorgeous, but they can always sometimes not be very nice, and I think I saw that around me, not specifically to me, and I decided that, I wanted to be a leader, and somehow I managed to, but in my own right, I would advocate for younger people. Now, I've always had a little sister with Down syndrome, and I love her very much. So I decided, no, if there's anyone that's going to do it, it has to be me, because Joe Bloggs off the street isn't going to do it. So yeah, I think that for me was just my school and upbringing and everything like that.
For me, my dad is a small business person. He started, he's an accountant, but he started a small building company with his brother and brother-in-law the year I was born. So got brought up in a small business household. What Dad taught me, I suppose, was the importance of just doing the best you can, you know, just going for it, giving it a shot. And quite seriously, that's all I've ever done at any point, is just be enthusiastic, give it my best show, and when an opportunity comes up, go for it. It's that simple, really.
Aren't you fortunate to have had that message from a young age? I'm wondering, Nipuni, whether, you know, being a young woman, is it more difficult to go out there and forge that path? Are you, in a way, discriminated against because of your youth?
Do you know, that's a really, really interesting concept, because I haven't actually thought about my age. And the only time that I've ever had my age be a problem is because I'm a Lifeline counsellor, so I work on the Lifeline hotline. And sometimes I get a call and they say to me, "Oh, sorry, you sound too young. I can't talk to you." And I'm like, okay, you know, and then I'm like, why don't you just give me a go and let's chat? You know, an hour and a half later, we're still talking, and you know, and my age hasn't come into it, because it doesn't have anything to do about it. Age doesn't come into it. It's what I've got inside of me, my training, what Lifeline has equipped me with. And so in leading, I feel sometimes people don't take me seriously, and you know, I keep them to their word, and if they tell me that they're going to buy my flowers, they're going to buy my flowers. And you know, I will keep them accountable to that, and I think that that's got to do with ambition, but also perseverance. And as a young person, sometimes, yeah, maybe people are like, she's just too young. But, you know, it's not like I say, she's just too old.
Thanks.
We at this end of the panel are relieved by that.
No, you know, and I just think that those that think age is a barrier or a hindrance really need a reality check, because last time I checked, it had nothing to do with it.
Wow, beautifully put. What about your journey, Emma? You talked before about not wanting to be defined by blindness, but what kind of challenges, particularly in the workplace, did you face because of that?
Well, I think as a leader, it certainly has been interesting to see sometimes people's reactions. For example, I've walked into a meeting with a sighted colleague who might be one of my staff, and everybody's automatically assumed that they're the CEO and I must be the admin person. And it's interesting how often that still happens. And I don't actually blame anybody for that. I just think there's a lot of unconscious bias that still exists, both for women and for people with disability. I think oftentimes people with disability are expected to be the ones who need the support. They're not expected to be the person who leads. They're not expected to have a voice, let alone one that, you know, rarely shuts up. So I think it's really interesting that to kind of be pushing those boundaries and trying to sort of get people to think differently. You know, just by getting out of bed in the morning, really. And I think it's sometimes really difficult for people to even be aware that they are thinking in that way. It's not that people kind of go, oh, she's a bit different. They don't even. It's not even conscious. It's totally unconscious. So I think for me, I just like to kind of get to know people and talk to people. And usually, once I get to know people, that all that stuff tends to fall away, and people just see me as, you know, a person with, you know, all the normal flaws of human beings. So I think it's just a matter of managing that and getting people to look beyond, you know, what they see initially, really.
Speaking of breaking down stereotypes, Kate, you went into politics at a time when women were especially a rare beast in that business in Australia. Did you find that you were stereotyped as, oh, can she be strong enough as a leader because she's a woman?
Like many female leaders in the political space, so when I took over as leader of the opposition, which was the year after I was elected, and then became Chief Minister 2 years later. Now, the only reason I got to be leader of the opposition is the party thought we couldn't win.
Yeah.
Oh, well. We proved
You
that
got the
wrong.
hospital pass.
We got the hospital pass. And actually, if you have a look around at women who have led political parties in Australia, on the whole, like almost always, the reason they got the ball was because, hey, we're not going to win the next election, so we'll give it to the girl. Sorry, the woman, but they might have actually said it the other way. So it was good discrimination. They gave me the job and we won. So there you are. Do I think that there was discrimination? I don't think any of the guys got asked in pre-selection about how they were going to look after their children, and I did get asked that. Look, there is still that stuff that goes on. I think it's a whole heap better now than it used to be. But, with all of those sorts of things that get in the way, the trick is just to let it flow over the top and get on with the job. Because if you let it get to you, you can never take that next step. I think that, for me, the thing that I'm best at, I suppose, is being able to stay reasonably focused and let the crap flow over and not get tied up by it. And if you can do that, the world's your oyster, really.
Gee, that's good advice. You touched on one of your other challenges, which is the fact that your kids were 9 and 11 when you were ACT Chief Minister. And I know it's a question that's not asked of men, and it's a question we should ask of men, but how did you manage it within your own family?
Oh, incredibly badly.
That's incredibly honest.
Look, I have to say that the work-life balance thing is so difficult. There is no doubt, and I don't know that anybody gets it right. What we did, though, and I think it is about having some rules, shall we say, and I know that's seeming a bit directional, but, careers, jobs, they take up as much of your life as you will give them, in my view. They could take up 100% of it or something less. Now, politics is worse than most things because it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you're always on call. So what we did is I said, okay, I don't do breakfasts. I take the kids to school. That's my job. At the other end of the day, which was really difficult in the political space because so many dinners, so many things, I organised for either my husband or we had a live-in student, a nursing student who lived with us and could pick up the kids from school and do other things. Now, that was the only way I could make it work for me. My time was the morning, and my staff knew I didn't do breakfasts. I dropped the kids at school. So unless you have those sort of rules, the job takes up everything. That was my solution. Not a very good one, but it worked.
Well, we were talking before about Annabelle Crabb's book, The Wife Drought, how, without being pejorative about the term wife, women in politics do need someone at home or a support network to be able to make it work. Emma, you have 2 children, and you mentioned before that your husband was a stay-at-home dad, and it's a shame it's so rare.
Yeah, it is a shame it's so rare. And I was just thinking about what Kate was saying and thinking how extraordinarily lucky I was to have that support, and it really was, very strong support. He actually kind of essentially put his career totally on hold to look after the kids when they were babies, and so that I could, because at the time I was doing my first CEO role in an arts organisation, so I just felt I had to give it everything. I didn't feel like I had a choice. That doesn't mean I never saw my kids, but it certainly means that I didn't do the school runs. I didn't do, all of those bits and pieces as much. And it was really, I don't think I could have done it without that level of support. I think I would have struggled to do
Did
that.
you feel guilty?
Oh, constantly.
Oh, and look, absolutely, what is it? How's your guilt level today? All mine's here, It's all right.
And how do we get past that guilt, I guess?
I think I'm getting over it now, though. I think maybe it's because my kids are getting a bit older. I've got a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I'm starting to see with my 7-year-old daughter that she is starting to recognise the contribution that I am making and that my husband is making in terms of, you know, being in the workplace, and my husband is blind as well. So I think it's really important for her and for both of them to see that we are making meaningful contributions to society. And in some ways, I kind of think that's more important than that we're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But maybe that's just me trying to, you know, make myself feel better. I'm not sure.
It's not, because my kids are older now, and so they were brought up with me working extraordinarily long hours. And if you ask both my kids now what their view, well, my adult children, how they felt about it, their view is that the fact that they had a mum who was happy in her job, who was committed, who was in, you know, making a difference, hopefully, was really important, and the opportunities they got to see that, you know, to see what's possible was worth every time that I didn't pick them up from after school care.
This is wonderful. You've both made me feel better about the fact that at the Mother's Day lunch at school the other day, which I couldn't go to because I'm a working mother, my daughter fainted and fell 2 metres off the stage. Oh. And all the good mothers who were there called me while I was in the city and sent me videos of it and said, "You better come, they're calling an ambulance." So that's made me feel much better. She's okay, I hasten to add. Nipuni, I know that obviously you're young and at the start of a wonderful career. Is it something that plays into your thought process? You know, perhaps you'd like to have a family down the track, perhaps not. Why is it that men don't have to think about this?
Yeah, it was only last night I was talking to my parents and I was like, you know, I just wasn't prepared for this year. I feel like when we started The Florist about a year and 2 months ago, I started off with 20 Facebook likers, and they were my friends, and I think they felt that they had to support me because I would have gone after them. But now, you know, 5,500 likers later, we walk into Westfield and we get asked if we can have a photo with people, and I'm like, wow, what just happened? But really, in reality, I'm still this, you know, young girl that has no idea what breakfast cereal I want to have for the week, let alone what leadership is and how I can be a leader and how I can help change other people's lives and help people change people's lives. And so, yeah, it does play in my part. And I know that when we had our ABC interview for the She Leads conference, one of our panellists was talking about how a lot of CEOs talk about how divorce is a big part after they become a CEO. And I was like, oh, God. 27 cats, here I come. But seriously, I was like, oh my God, why does success have to be collaborated with marriage breakdown, and why can't you have both? And and that still plays in my mind because I never want to be defined by my success, and I never want success to be defining me in terms of, oh, I can't get married because I'm going to get divorced. I think that's ridiculous. But, you know, I hope that, yeah, I do want to have a family, and I would love to get married and everything, and 27 cats doesn't appeal to me. But, you know, later on down the track, at the moment, I'm so committed to this cause and trying to do the best I can, and I think that I have that advantage of being young and a bit blissfully unaware.
Let's move on to the way forward then. We know what the structural challenges are. How do we break them down? Emma, I'd like to talk to you about this concept of creating greater diversity in the workplace through what we sometimes call positive discrimination versus the so-called meritocracy, which in my mind there is no such thing as a meritocracy. Have you had some kind of backlash through this so-called positive discrimination?
Yes, definitely. It's been really interesting. So just so that people understand what happened, my predecessor was a non-disabled woman, and when she took on the job of CEO, she said, I'm going to do this for 2 years and then I'm stepping down, and a person with disability needs to be appointed to the role because, here we are, a national arts and disability organisation. How can we possibly be advocating on behalf of people with disability if a person with disability isn't leading the organisation? And so she did that. And there was a recruitment process, and I was the successful candidate. And I suppose from then on, I had a number of responses to that. There were, of course, people who went, "Oh, isn't that fantastic? You know, you're going to do a great job and it's going to be great, whatever." But there were also people who kind of went, "Oh, you've only been appointed because you're a person with disability. I'm not really sure that you're going to do that good a job." They didn't actually say that, but it was very clear by the way that they were responding to me. And I remember saying in my interview to the panel, you know, I want you to appoint the best person for the job. You know, please appoint the best person for the job. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, the proof's in the pudding. Irrespective of whether I'm a person with disability or not, if I'm doing a good job, then, you know, that's the yardstick by which I need to be measured. And I don't understand why there is still this perception that there is no way that a person with disability could be the best person for the job. I just find that quite extraordinary. So, you know, I think there have been... I remember there was an article published the year that I took on the role that mentioned Arts Access Australia as one of the 13 companies to watch in 2013. And their reasoning was, well, surely this Emma Bennison, or they didn't say it like this, but surely this person who's been appointed is more than a token gesture, so let's see what she can do, which to be honest, made me feel quite uncomfortable. The pressure has been, I'm not going to beat around the bush, the pressure has been enormous because, you know, I'm one of only 2 leaders with disability in the arts and disability sector in Australia. So that's a big kind of responsibility to carry, you know, to be expected to kind of take on that role, but also to be the poster person at the same time. But I think I agree with what Kate said before. You've just got to kind of let it go. You've just got to do the job and hope that, you know, what you do is enough. And, you know, I think we have got some good runs on the board and I think that we are moving in the right direction. So that's the best yardstick as far as I'm concerned. And that's the way we should be thinking, not about, you know, people's impairments or whether people are women or men or any of those things. Just about the job, getting the job done.
That concept of the best person for the job is framed in so many different ways in this debate about quotas and targets. Because you're the ex-politician, Kate, I'm going to give you the thorny question. Quotas or targets, should we do it?
I have to say I don't like targets or quotas particularly. What I do like, I like targets where we want to head. So visionary targets, where do we want to be in our organisation? Now, the fact is now that the data is clear. Organisations, businesses that have a mix of gender and people with different backgrounds and so on in their senior management ranks and on their boards do better. It actually reflects in the bottom line. So we no longer have to argue this from the perspective that there needs to be gender equality. The fact is any company or any organisation that doesn't do it isn't acting in the best interests of either their shareholders or their members. It's actually that simple now. So we have some solid arguments to run with, some good data to run with on why companies and not-for-profits and organisations generally should be looking for diversity at their senior management level and on their boards. That's the argument. So what's the vision? The vision is to have the best operating organisation and company. To do that, you need more women. So I like to just tip it that way because that's the way you can get everybody on the page. If you run, we need 50% women, you immediately lose people. Now, maybe you shouldn't, but you still do. Tipping it the other way, you get the same outcome. Everyone's on the page because everyone has to operate in the best interests of their company, their organisation, their, whatever. So there you go.
Can I add something to that? Just to say that I agree. However, I think when you include, for example, disability, and I speak about disability because that's my area, into the mix, unfortunately there is such a dearth of opportunity in terms of senior management roles because people haven't yet kind of come to the realisation that actually, yes, people are able to do it, that I think in some ways you do almost need some more targeted approaches. And I think I agree. I have been a quota. I've been part of a quota. I'm sure we all have in this room at some point. And it was horrible. I mean, I think I stuffed envelopes for about a year and a half. So, I don't think quotas work unless they're coupled with vision, as Kate said. But I do think there needs to be some targeted approaches as well.
Can I say I agree with you in the disability space? There's so many myths about employing people with disabilities. Still, we've got to dispel the myths, and to do that, we probably need a different way to go that, it just won't happen on its own.
Nipuni, I'd like to bring you in here because you are an activist in the disability sector as well. What are your thoughts on the target and quota argument?
Look, it's really difficult for me because specifically for Gigi's Flowers, it is a 3-woman team. Guyana, my little sister, myself, and my beautiful stepmom who does all the arranging. So we're girl power to the max, and we're mentored by my dad who, bless, he is a very dignified businessman, but sometimes he puts on that pink t-shirt and is stripping roses for us. So, that is exactly what I want to see in the world, is more men he's taking such a supportive role of us because we're flourishing. And, don't get me wrong, he can be doing 100 other things that are not stripping roses or cleaning rose petals off the floor, but he's doing that because he sees that what we're doing is really important. And I think for us, it's really important as women to have men that support us because I know that, that's where the feminism thing comes, and being a feminist comes as a loaded term because people are like, all feminists think that men are terrible. No, that's not the case at all. Men help us to flourish. And, it's a personal example, but like my dad, he helps us flourish, and we would not be where we are today without him. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room, your husbands, brothers, whoever, they support us to flourish, and that's quite important for us.
Speaking about encouraging men to become more of a part of this movement, Kate, I want to dig down on something you said before, because you've been the leader, whether in politics or in lobby groups of very powerful organisations that are all generally quite male-dominated. You said before about prosecuting the argument as a business case. Give us some examples about how, as a leader, you've prosecuted that argument for more diversity.
What we're doing, I'll just talk about what we're doing right now at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We've got a program on the table called Employ Outside the Box. And what Employ Outside the Box does is it dispels the myths, because people think, some people in business think that people with a disability will have more time off. They have less time off. They'll leave. They're more loyal. I mean, there's a whole range of quite specific myths that exist, that there's good data that shows, what the reality is. So I'm a big believer that, if you can put a position that is underpinned by data, by research, by fact, people on the whole pick it up. If it's emotive, if it's just we've got to do good, we've got to do the right stuff, it doesn't work very well. So my view is the prosecution of an argument is always based upon good data, good research, fact, and and then persuasion comes in after that.
Aha. This has opened up an area that I'm personally fascinated about as a journalist. It's the use of language in influence. The fact that if you say fairness, it doesn't mean anything to anybody because everyone's concept of fairness is different. But if you say balance, that really speaks to people. Little things like that. As leaders, how have you used language and how have you used influence to affect change?
Well, language is a really key area, I think, in terms of influence. I really think it makes a huge difference to the way people perceive what you're saying and what you're trying to get across. For example, we talk a lot about recognising and celebrating the contribution of artists with disability. So rather than seeing people with disability as recipients of support or recipients of arts and cultural activity, we like to talk about people with disability as arts and cultural contributors. So that's just an example of how, I've really tried to change the language so that people start to think differently. And it has had some effect, over the past few years in terms of generating increased funding for the sector and so forth, because people, are given an opportunity to kind of turn it on its head, the traditional kind of notions of disability on their head. I think it's very useful.
I think with language, I, as a young person, have really worked quite hard to speak to other young people and other women, and I will for the rest of my life always, I'm only human, I will make mistakes, I will do everything, and I don't think anyone can possibly tell me not to be like that. And I think with language, the way I communicate, I've made it a thing that I will always communicate the way I do it, because it's worked for me and it's working, and that's what people need. We need more real people, because, people that just kind of are aliens and do stuff electronically as a robot, here, this is the business and everything. They're real people, we're a real family, we're just, we're in our garden shed on a trestle table, like we're so real life, and I think that's really important. So with language, with our Facebook page, with social media, with communicating to everyone, I'm just trying to be a real person and just be true to who I am and how I was brought up, and I think I hope that's the best way to do it. Fingers crossed.
It is.
Good.
Okay. Look, from my perspective, really good leaders are great simplifiers. They're not people who feel a need to explain themselves or to educate. They're just authentic, real people who are willing to admit their ups and their downs and their roundabouts, shall we say. That makes people authentic, to use a bit of, I suppose, almost jargon at the moment, but that's pretty important, isn't it? I think too often we try to communicate in a way that makes people know how much we know or how important we are. Really bad idea. Throw that out the window. And quite seriously, communication is about simplicity. It's about who you are. It's about values, ethics, and not trying to prove anything.
You've really articulated the great skills that a leader needs to have, but each of you has been through enormous challenges. Can you each tell me briefly the greatest challenge of your career and what you've learnt from that as a leader?
Should I start? Well, I guess the greatest challenge for me was a scenario where I had been invited or asked to be the successor to my superior, my boss. And then when it came about, it became a very difficult process. It was a very challenging transition, both for me and for the team. But I think really the way that I managed that was, I really think as a leader you need to kind of have equal measures of compassion and pragmatism. So, and I'm getting a bit recipe focused because I just got a Thermomix the other day, so I'm starting to get into to recipe speak. Sorry, but yeah, it's really good, the Thermomix, by the way. But anyway, I do really think that you actually have to. I'm going to use bad language, but you actually have to give a shit about other people. I really agree with what Auntie Janet said this morning about, just be nice to people. You actually have to be nice to people because otherwise, they're not going to respect you. Just because you happen to hold a position of so-called influence and power doesn't mean that you automatically deserve respect. You have to earn it. But I also think you have to be pragmatic. So when things are going wrong, or when things are not going in the right direction, if you keep doing the same thing, then things will keep going wrong. So you actually have to do something different. So I think if you can, well, for me anyway, it's certainly worked to combine those two things. Also, obviously, I think you've probably recognised that I like to maintain a sense of humour at all times, because otherwise you just become really, I don't know, weighed down by stuff. It's really easy to become weighed down and to forget who you are and to forget to be a real person, a real human being. And I don't want to be like that. And I don't think people are really interested in people who are like that. So I think a sense of humour is really important. But I also think one of the other things I've learnt recently is that it's actually okay sometimes not to feel confident about your leadership, not to feel confident that it's all going to be fine and it's all working. We all experience challenges, like Steph was talking about before, and anxiety and feeling, unprepared, underexperienced. All of those things are really normal. And I think when you stop feeling those things, that's probably the time to retire, because that's actually what I think feeds your ability to do a good job, is the anxiety and not always getting it right. So.
And what you're talking about there is embracing vulnerability as well. Nipuni, any moments where it could be your greatest challenge or a mistake that you've made and a great thing that you've learned as a leader from that?
Yeah, I think that for me personally, and I'm sure there are 100 more mistakes to come, but self-doubt is the biggest crippler in the world. I really feel like as a woman, but any other person, self-doubt can really get you down. But furthermore, people that doubt you, okay? I don't think there's anything worse in the world than that. And I personally know that I've had a few people, but one specific person that has doubted me for a very long time. And that in turn made me doubt myself, in turn made me doubt everything, and it was just this massive, vicious cycle. And that's not a very healthy place to be. And I think that if you believe in yourself, the rest will follow. And I don't say that everything I do, I believe in myself, but I also think that it's really important to not doubt yourself, but also not have other people doubt you, because I can doubt myself enough for everyone, like, thank you very much, but thanks, no thanks, and I think that as leaders, we are going to doubt ourselves. We never, sometimes I can get up and say something or do something and I'll be like, oh, and like my insides have flipped over. But I feel like if you can make sure you surround yourself, and I am so very lucky with a supportive family, supportive friends, a supportive workplace. They back me, and with that, I am actually very confident, and I can excel further. And I think that is a big challenge. And I think throughout my life, I've learnt that lesson only very recently, actually. But I've learnt that self-doubt is normal, but other people doubting you, that's not normal, and that's not healthy.
It's not at all. Kate?
Wish I'd learned it when I was your age.
It's impressive, isn't it?
It's pretty impressive. Look, there's so many times when I stuffed up, really. I was just trying to think of one that'd be relevant. I will. Look, I think I'll give you an actual real example of when I stuffed up big time. Some of you will remember, and some of you won't because you're too young, but when I was Chief Minister, we had minority governments for both terms that I was Chief Minister for, which meant we were reliant on the crossbenchers for all legislation to go through. And in one of the parliaments, the crossbench was Paul Osborne, Dave Regendijk, and the Greens. We needed two of them to get the budget through. Now, the budget's a bit of an issue because, I don't know, but public servants feel a need to be paid. Yeah, don't understand that, but it's one of those things. So it's a bit important to actually get it passed. The price of passing the budget for Dave and Paul was for me to support a piece of legislation that they were putting forward. Now, you probably won't know, but I am chronically pro-choice. And some of my colleagues weren't, but, that's life, there's balance out there. Now, this particular piece of legislation had in it a 48-hour cool-off period for women who wanted to have a termination, and also required a booklet to be given to the women which explained, which had pictures in it. They were pictures from a first-year biology booklet. They weren't any worse than that, but for all of that, they were pictures. In the end, I agreed, and I shouldn't have. I've always regretted it. I should have let the budget go down. But at the end of the day, you know, if you do stuff that you believe is wrong, it is wrong. You know, there you go. There's the message. If your gut tells you this isn't the way to go, there is no level of pragmatism that makes it okay. So that's just a message. So for the things for me that I've done that I'm not proud of or that went wrong was when I did things to try to keep people happy, to try to, you know, as too much of a trade-off for values or ethics. If it feels wrong, it is wrong, don't do it, is the story, no matter what the outcome is going to be. And sometimes outcomes can be quite big. So back to what does that mean about leadership? And look, see, I don't particularly see myself as a leader, there you go. But what does it mean about leadership? It means you've really got to be willing to piss people off sometimes. You can't keep everybody happy, but you really, really have to do what your gut tells you.
Thank you for your candour and your wisdom. That is a really powerful message. I think it's a good point to open this up to questions. Who would like to ask anything of these wonderful women? Yes? Oh, that's all right. There's one coming.
Please do stand up, she said. Deanna Lane from the Wijewickrema in New South Wales. Just two comments. Number one, I just wanted a comment on the quota targets. I think that Norway shows us the way they broke the pattern of males hiring males for boards, and it broke the pale males-Dale syndrome. So I'm a big fan of quotas. But language, you mentioned language, and I'm a writer, a speech writer, and every word to me is important. We have a lot of issues to deal with. Descriptors already today have been bossy, blonde, young. I know that you mentioned this as being in a throwaway line because you've got a great sense of humour, Kate, but you said you were old when you were interviewed. Now, I look at you, I don't see old, I see fabulous, I see intelligent, I see leader, I see a lot of those things. Yeah, I agree. And I'm just thinking, we label ourselves enough. Can we just stop, do you think, calling ourselves those things? Because I've never heard a man, John Howard, nobody, Joe Biden, anybody, the Pope, come up and say, I'm old.
Can I, you know, look, I agree to an extent, but I tell you what, you can just go too far on political, small p, political correctness. I think it's really important to be who you are, and that's the thing that I wish I'd learnt it a lot of years earlier. I am who I am, and I'm really comfortable with it. That said, I've got to be careful with the words I use because the message that I'm sending to others, it's not about me particularly, but I agree with you, I've got to be more careful, so thank you for that.
I would also add that I think it's okay for us to label ourselves. So, for example, I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, I'm a blind person. It's part of who I am. I like being blind. People find that very strange. But I think that's okay. I think the problem arises when people make assumptions based on those labels. So I would say I feel personally that assumptions are a bigger problem than the labels themselves. And also when other people label you in a way that you're not comfortable with. So I think it's the old, you know, disability awareness training principle, which can be applied to anyone. Ask the person themselves how they'd like to be described. Don't make assumptions. I think that's the key.
Thank you for your comments. That's opened up a really interesting discussion. And I'm with you on Norway. Okay, someone there, thank you.
Lisa Roby, Australian Healthcare and Hospitals Association. Sheryl Sandberg made a great comment years ago when she had her book Lean In about young women self-selecting themselves out of leadership roles by long before they're in a position to have to worry about looking after children and things, choosing a family-friendly type role or a position of less responsibility in case at some point in the future they might have children. Have you had to make a decision where you took the leadership role over a more traditional feminine role or something that could potentially have made life a bit easier? And how did you make that decision?
Great question. Thank you.
No, sorry.
I have. Yeah, I definitely have. And I have to say, you know, you'd think it would be a really difficult decision, and it's not to say that I haven't had moments where I've wondered whether I've made the right decision for my children. But really, honestly, it wasn't a difficult decision because I just felt like I had to do this. There weren't many people lining up to take these roles. And I think that sometimes you just have to recognise, and this is not me meaning to say that I'm the only person who could do it. There are hundreds of people out there who could do it. I just happened to be in this situation at this point in time, and frankly, it's too good an opportunity to pass up because it might not come again. And I certainly don't want to be the last person with disability in this kind of role. So, you know, if I can make that opportunity possible for other women with disability, then yeah, it's a no-brainer. Had to do it.
Well, I personally don't have kids and I haven't had to make any choices like that. But one of my mentors once said to me, you know, she had to drop down to part-time. And she said the decision was purely because she decided that her editor wouldn't be on her deathbed with her, but her kids would. And, you know, and sometimes push is going to come to shove. And, yeah, you're going to have to do something for your kids or take time out because at the same time that time of your life is, like, very short as well. And I think that's all quite relative and, you know, you have to do what you have to do. So, yeah, but I think that piece of advice has always stuck with me.
Yeah, me too. And having said that, I have this year dropped back to part-time and I'm in a co-CEO arrangement. And one of the reasons I did that was to make sure that there's a good succession plan in place, but also so that I could spend more time with my kids and some more time on my singing and songwriting practice. So, yeah, I think you do have to get the balance right at some point, but it certainly wasn't a choice. There was no choice.
Can I say I think the issue is a little different, and I love that book, but I think if as women we see it a little bit differently than sort of making a call on which direction we're going to take. If every job you do your best, you're enthusiastic, you give it your best shot, okay, and that's what you'd hope you'd do in any job, and that's, you know, what you do. I think where women get it wrong is that they are really bad at taking opportunities when they fall. And regularly women will say to me, oh, look, the kids are too young, I'm a bit worried about my elderly mum, I don't think I'm properly qualified, if only I'll just finish this course first. A whole range of those things. I think that what we're bad at is just accepting that the time is never right. So if I can leave you with a few messages today, remember the time is never right, and so this is as good a time as any. So you just have to jump, and I think that's the thing we get wrong. We make excuses for why it's not the right time, but it's never the right time.
And it will be okay.
Yeah,
Either way, whatever happens, you know, it will be okay one day.
Yeah. And
Eventually.
One day. And look, can I just expand that and broaden a little bit by saying these are conversations that we need to have in our own households with the men in our lives or the partners in our lives. You know, it shouldn't always be a conversation about you're the woman, you're having the child, you should be the one who pulls back. This is conversations we have to have on the couch at home, you know, more widely in society, that men have to be confronted about making these decisions as well. There were some more questions up the back, I think. Yes? Is there a microphone up there? Over here?
I do have a
Oh,
microphone.
God, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Angela Priestley from Women's Agenda. Tracey mentioned that there was a point where she gave up being the good girl. I wanted to ask if the panel also had a similar turning point and if you might just simply advise everyone in the room to stop being the good girl.
I think for me, and one of the big things is, you know, I'm young, I'm 22, generally, yeah, my friends are out at a club or something like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm still there too, and I've had my fun. But I think sometimes that there's...
You'll have more fun,
And
I
I'll
promise.
have more fun. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm speaking like I'm a grandma. No, and, you know, I think that there's sometimes this thing that's like, oh, you know, why aren't you out? Why are you, you know, trying to do all this stuff and, you know, speaking at a conference and doing full-time employment? Why aren't you out, you know, I don't know, doing something naughty? And, you know, and I'm like, well, actually, this is what I really want. This is what makes me tick. This is actually makes me happier than a few tequila shots, you know? This is what makes me tick, and this is what's making me really happy.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, yeah. Yeah, tequila's good, says Emma.
That's what we were just saying.
And you can do both.
Yeah. Okay, after this. But, you know, and at the same time, I feel like I feel like sometimes people will label me and people will be like, oh, she's such a square. And I'm like, hello, you know, I'm just trying to, I genuinely believe I'm just trying to change the world, and I want to. So just excuse me and my tequilas. But I think that's really important. I think that I feel like women can often, you know, be labelled as a square or a bit conservative or whatever, and really no, they have something else that makes them happier, and it's about following your bliss, and it's about doing what makes you happy. And if that's not, you know, doing whatever, and that's making flowers and, you know, chasing people around with flowers, so be it. Like, yeah, that's basically, Angela, that's my answer.
Emma, you seem kind of feisty. Was there ever a time where you didn't push through because you were too much of a good girl?
Yes. Yeah, I think there was. I mean, I'm just trying to remember. It's a long time ago. But I think when I was a kid, you know, when I was in primary school, I used to sit back and kind of let people intimidate me and just kind of stay quiet when I really should have said something. But even in the workplace, I remember having that same experience as you, Tracey, where I just remember thinking, thank God I've got a job. You know, it doesn't matter about the pay, it doesn't matter about the conditions, it doesn't matter that I'm sitting here stuffing envelopes. Thank God I've got a job. Because, you know, after having gone to hundreds of job interviews and, you know, just been rejected, having a job was just the be all and end all of the world. So I did do my fair share of that. I think what changed it though was probably when I started to see you know, other people, other friends of mine with disability getting a pretty raw deal, and I just thought, oh, this is ridiculous. I've got to do what I can to change this and do something about this. So I don't think there was a specific moment, but I think it's just a kind of build-up of issues over time.
It's a very powerful point to make. Often as women, we stand up because we're standing up for others. Kate?
Look, that's absolutely true. Look, I suppose I'm a little different because I've sort of been self-employed more or less, or CEO, since I was 25, so for a long time. But I suppose what I learnt probably back in, you know, my pharmacy days was probably, and again, I suppose this is the issue, you just can't keep everyone happy. I suppose I spent an awful lot of time trying to make sure everyone was happy, you know, everyone was okay, you know, the house was tidy, you know, everything was okay, I could get to work on time, my staff were happy, everything was happy, you know, in other words, you just die doing that. So I learnt reasonably quickly that you couldn't keep everybody happy, and from that moment on, life has been a whole heap better. That doesn't mean, excuse me, that you're not nice to people. It just means that in life, trying to keep everybody happy is impossible. There was this horrible book written back in the 70s called Superwoman. Burn it. You know, it was a book that was about saying how you could have, you know, a great garden and a happy husband and a happy house and a great career and your kids, you know. Anyway, should be burnt. Totally impossible. So the reality is it's just learning that you can't keep everybody happy, and what you've got to do is just keep the balance as close to right for your life and for the people that matter to you in your life as possible.
Yeah, be good to yourselves. Yeah. Question over here?
Okay, I think I'm the only man here. Is there anyone?
Well done. Yeah, hey.
Yes, sorry. One point that I want kind of really ask question, which seems that I think Kate gonna be a bit more with me as an experienced one. Perceptions, I think it's a kind of, or perception or assumption or that kind of natural behavior that we've got. Let's say if I have a friend that knows that I'm attending a conference today at this hotel, and he's coming and looking for me but don't know the title, he just maybe walked there and said, oops, no, he's not going to be here. Because that's a perception that all of us held always. And it comes from the accumulated experience. We are not a goldfish to forget things within 3 seconds. But my question is, your advice for the leaders, the women leaders, is to try to draw a line, a new line, let's say, instead of the traditional line which men-dominant society draw. So your advice is to draw a new line, or let's say wipe out any line which is going to define the genders, instead of talking about like, I'm a woman, whatever men do, I should battle it. I mean, if there are 100,000 men in this world doing the suicide, the equality doesn't mean that there should be 100,000 women doing that as well. They may gonna do stupid things, no one wanna repeat it. So what's your real advice for this? Thank you.
Can I say I agree with your point that, and I think your point is that, you know, leadership is leadership. It actually doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man or a person with a disability or, you know, whatever. The fact is good leadership is good leadership. And as a society, we need to ensure that all people have the opportunity to get to that point, whoever we might be. So it's about opportunities, and that's where mentoring comes in my view. I think that's something that I didn't have the opportunities for fundamentally because there weren't a lot of women around, you know, who were in a position to mentor me. But I think our challenge is to see leadership for what it is, and that's something really important for our society, for business, for, you know, the community to go forward. Doesn't matter who the people are, but we've got to make sure our young people are properly mentored to be the best they can be.
That is a perfect point to wrap up on. It's not about male leadership or female leadership, it's about leadership. Please thank our wonderful panellists, Kate, Nipuni and Emma.